Today we're going into the part of our own planet we understand less than the surface of Mars. And I don't mean spooky ocean stuff. I mean a sound picked up by military-grade listening equipment thousands of miles apart that was louder than anything a living animal should be able to make. A stone structure cut into 90-degree steps sitting 75 feet underwater off the coast of Japan, and nobody studying it agrees on whether a human being built it. A single photograph from 1964 that looks like a piece of technology that nobody has ever been able to explain and nobody has ever been able to find again. More than 80% of our own ocean has never been mapped in any real detail. Not the moon, not Mars, our ocean. That's not a mystery you have to go looking for. That's a hidden world sitting under every boat that's ever sailed. Let's start with the sound that made the US Navy think something enormous was down there. Number 1. The bloop. It's the summer of 1997, and a network of hydrophones scattered across the Pacific, equipment sensitive enough that the US Navy uses it to track submarines, picks up something none of them can identify. Not a whale, not a ship, not an earthquake. Sensors more than 3,000 miles apart all catch it at once. That's the scale we're talking about. A single sound, loud enough to cross an ocean basin. For comparison, the loudest animal on Earth, the blue whale, tops out around 188 decibels. This was loud enough that NOAA scientists, the same people who monitor the entire Pacific Ocean floor for a living, didn't have an answer. For 8 years, they didn't have one. And when the agency that tracks nuclear submarines for a living says, "We don't know what that is," people notice. The internet did what the internet does. Cthulhu jokes, giant squid theories, a sound so strange it got its own nickname, the bloop. Here's the thing though. In 2005, NOAA matched the bloop's acoustic signature to something else entirely: icequakes. Massive slabs of Antarctic ice, some larger than the island of Manhattan, cracking and shearing off the ice shelf into the Southern Ocean. Not a monster. Ice. So the bloop wasn't a creature. It was the sound of a continent's ice sheet tearing itself apart, loud enough to be heard on the other side of the planet. We didn't find a monster. We found out ice can scream, which honestly might be worse. But the bloop isn't the only sound down there NOAA still can't fully explain. We'll come back to that. First, let's go to the one place on Earth that's genuinely harder to reach than the surface of the moon. It's January 23rd, 1960, and two men, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh, are sealed inside a steel sphere the size of a small car, sinking toward a place no human being has ever been. The Challenger Deep, the lowest point of the Mariana Trench. Nearly 11,000 meters down. Pressure at the bottom is over 1,000 atmospheres, roughly the weight of 50 jumbo jets pressing down on a single point. In more than 60 years since that first dive, only a small handful of expeditions have ever reached the actual bottom. Here's what's really wild. We have complete high-resolution maps of the surface of Mars. We have maps of the far side of the moon. And more than 80% of our own ocean floor has never been mapped to anything close to that level of detail. The Seabed 2030 project, an international effort backed by the United Nations, is trying to change that, and by their own public progress updates, full high-resolution coverage of the ocean floor is still years away. And what's actually living down there is stranger than the darkness suggests. An estimated 90% of deep-sea animals make their own light. The giant squid, a real animal over 40 feet long, wasn't filmed alive in its natural habitat until 2012. Not photographed, not sighted. Filmed for the first time in recorded human history only in this century. We are not talking about aliens. We are talking about our own backyard, and we have explored less of it than a planet 140 million miles away. Somewhere down there, in the part we haven't mapped yet, is something we don't have a name for yet. But here's the thing, at least the trench is honest about being unexplored. Some of what's down there was hiding in plain sight, on a beach, in Japan. It's 1986, and a local dive guide off Yonaguni, a tiny island at the southern tip of Japan, is scouting a new spot to find hammerhead sharks. Instead, about 75 feet down, he swims straight into a wall. Not a natural-looking wall, straight edges, flat terraces, 90-degree steps, stacked like a staircase for something enormous, running the length of a football field, rising nearly 90 feet off the sea floor. And it split the people who study it clean in half. One geologist, Masaaki Kimura, has spent decades arguing this is man-made, a stepped platform, possibly cut when sea levels were far lower during the last glacial period, which would put it thousands of years before the pyramids of Egypt. Most other geologists who've examined it, including researchers who specialize in exactly this kind of rock, argue it's natural, sandstone that fractures along flat bedding planes and straight fault lines, a known process that produces almost identical rectangular terracing on dry land, on the same island above the waterline where nobody disputes it's natural. Here's the problem. Neither side has the one thing that would settle it. No tools, no quarry, no confirmed date. Every few years, a new dive survey reopens the argument, and it just doesn't close. So is Yonaguni a monument, or is it just really, really good geology? The honest answer is that trained scientists, looking at the exact same rock formation, have reached opposite conclusions for almost 40 years, which either proves it's natural, or proves that whoever built it knew exactly what natural rock in that spot was supposed to look like. Yonaguni is at least an argument, with two sides and real evidence on the table. What we found in the Baltic Sea in 2011 is stranger, because for this one, the equipment itself started acting up. It's June 2011, and a small team called Ocean X is dragging side-scan sonar across the seafloor between Sweden and Finland, looking for old shipwrecks, champagne mostly, sunken cargo. Instead, at around 85 meters down, their sonar returns a shape nobody was expecting. A roughly circular formation, wider than a football field, with what looks like a tail-like ridge trailing off one side and stepped terracing along its surface. Divers went down expecting a rock. What their footage, and their own equipment logs, describe is a little stranger than a rock. Let's be straight about what's actually established here. The leading scientific explanation, and by far the most likely one, is a natural glacial deposit, a moraine left behind by a retreating ice sheet more than 10,000 years ago. That's a common, well-documented seafloor feature in that exact region. In 2012, a geologist from Stockholm University who examined rock samples pulled from the site called it, in his own words, a common geological formation. No metal, no manufactured material, just rock. But here's the part that's still genuinely unresolved. The Ocean X divers reported that some of their handheld electronics, cameras, satellite phones, lost power or malfunctioned when they got close to the object. That claim has never been independently tested by an outside team with controlled equipment. It isn't proven. It also isn't disproven. Nobody's gone back and repeated it properly. So the honest version of this story has two halves that are both true at once. The object itself is almost certainly a rock, and a specific testable claim about it has never actually been tested. That's not a cover-up. That's just an unfinished experiment sitting at the bottom of the Baltic Sea for over a decade. The Baltic Sea Anomaly, at least, has a name, a location, and a team that went back to look. The next one has none of that. Just one photograph from 1964 that nobody has ever fully explained, or ever found again. It's August 1964, and a US Navy research vessel called the USNS Eltanin is towing an automated camera sled across the bottom of the Bellingshausen Sea, off Antarctica, nearly 2.5 miles down, in total darkness, snapping photographs of seafloor no human eye would ever personally see. One frame, catalogued simply as photograph 440, shows something nobody was expecting: a symmetrical branching structure rising off the seafloor, evenly spaced arms radiating off a central stalk. At a glance, it looks almost mechanical. An antenna. The most likely explanation is almost as strange as the alternative. The leading theory is that it's a deep-sea glass sponge, a real, documented family of organisms that grow in exactly this kind of radial, symmetrical branching pattern to snag passing food in a place with almost nothing to eat. Not a machine. An animal, built like one. Here's the part that should bother you more than the photo itself. Nobody has ever gone back to that exact spot and photographed it again. No follow-up expedition, no specimen, no second picture, one trip, one frame, and 60+ years of nothing. So the leading theory isn't a UFO, it's an animal we're fairly confident actually exists, shaped like alien technology that we have made zero attempts to go back and actually confirm. One photograph, one trip, over 60 years. That's the real unglamorous state of ocean exploration. We don't need aliens to find something we can't explain. We just need to stop going back and checking. Now for the rest of the ocean's resume, a little shorter but just as hard to shake. NOAA didn't just catalogue the bloop. Over the years, they've named a whole list of unexplained sounds: Julia, slow down, whistle. Most turned out to be ice or underwater volcanic activity, same as the bloop. But one, called Upsweep, has been recorded nearly every year since 1991. Rises and falls in loudness on a repeating seasonal cycle like clockwork, and still doesn't have a confirmed source. In Antarctica, researchers have filmed something called a brinacle, a finger of death. It's an icicle that grows downward underwater, freezing everything it touches as it sinks. When it finally reaches the sea floor, it freezes the shallow water around it solid, and anything down there that can't swim away fast enough doesn't. When a whale dies and sinks to the deep sea floor, its body can feed an entire unique ecosystem, species found nowhere else on Earth, for up to 50 years. One corpse, half a century of life. Off the coast of Iceland and Greenland, cold, dense water cascades down an underwater cliff for more than 2 miles. Over 3 times the height of Angel Falls, the tallest waterfall on land. It's the largest waterfall on the planet, and it's completely invisible from the surface. And if you wanted to get as far away from another human being as physically possible on Earth, you'd sail to a spot in the South Pacific called Point Nemo, so remote that for much of the year, the nearest people to you aren't on any ship. They're astronauts on the International Space Station, passing overhead. It's also where space agencies deliberately crash old satellites and space stations, because there's a better chance of hitting absolutely nothing. Let's put it all together. The bloop wasn't a monster, it was a piece of Antarctica loud enough to cross the Pacific. The Mariana Trench is less mapped than the surface of Mars. Yonaguni might be a monument, or it might just be excellent geology. Nobody's proven it either way in 40 years. The Baltic Sea Anomaly is probably a rock, and one specific claim about it has never actually been tested. And somewhere off Antarctica sits a 60-year-old photograph of something we have simply never gone back to check. We've sent people to the moon, we've flown a helicopter on Mars, and right now there is more of our own planet sitting completely unmapped than there is of a rock 140 million miles away. Maybe the next great discovery isn't out there. Maybe it's just down. If that's the kind of thing you want in your feed, subscribe. Because next time, we're going back down, and what's waiting is stranger than any of this.